Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our monthly AB617 Portside Community Steering Committee meeting. We will be starting shortly, giving people some time to log on. Let me see if I can find Helen. So, Helen Einstein, are you there? I see you now, and I see that you have your audio on. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, we hear you clearly. Perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the interpretation. Let me make you the interpreter. Hold on. So good evening, everybody. I'm just going to launch the interpretation so as we wait for others to join. Bienvenidos a la reunión de diciembre de el comité directivo de interpretation. Chewy, can you actually stop the screen share for a second?
Interpretation looks available.
Ok, ya debe estar la interpretación disponible para las personas que necesitan interpretación del español al inglés. So thank you, everybody. We just thank you for your patience. We just got the interpretation up and going, and we'll go ahead and we'll start. So welcome everybody to the December 2020 meeting of the AB617 Portside Community Steering Committee. We are so glad to be here with you all on this last meeting of 2020. Yay! So I'm Daniela Simunovich. For those who are new, I'm co-facilitate these meetings with my colleague Chuy Flores, who is
La persona que está interpretando no se le escucha su voz.
Helen, no se escucha tu voz. A ver si puedes hablar un poco más.
Pasa mucho.
Great. Okay. ¿Se escucha mejor ahora? Helen, ¿sí? ¿Ya la escuchan mejor? Great. No? Okay. Helen, maybe if you get close to your microphone and raise the volume, a ver si ahí se escucha mejor.
No, no la estamos escuchando, no está hablando.
Okay, a ver si no está hablando porque...
I think Helen is on the English channel, it looks like.
Okay, let me change that then. Sorry for the, let's see. Okay, a ver, ahí está. ¿Ahí se escucha la interpretación? Si pueden ponerse en el canal Spanish.
Ya, a ver, ya te escucho a ti. A ver, la intérprete.
Sí, que hable la intérprete porque de ella no escuchamos nada.
Exacto.
Sí,
Ok, ahorita
hoy
ya.
sí.
Ahorita
Perfect.
sí.
Okay, gracias. Gracias. Okay, thank you for your patience, everyone, as we make sure that everybody on our committee is able to join. And thank you, Helen Artenstein, for interpreting for us this evening. So, Chuy, if you want to go to the next slide, and you can go to the next slide. We just want to welcome you all, and we'll go through the objectives. And I also want to welcome our colleague, our counterpart at the Air District, Deputy Director Domingo Vigil, to give any words of welcome if you wanted. So go ahead, Domingo.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Like Daniela said, this is our last meeting of the year, so I am very excited to be able to close the year with you guys. It's been quite a year for everybody on so many different respects, but I'm very excited about what's coming in the next year as far as our work in the Portside community. As all of you know, we're going to be focusing on finalizing our Serp, which I will talk about in my presentation during our next item on the agenda when it comes, when my turn comes. So I'll turn it over to Daniela. Thank you, everybody.
Great, thank you. So the objectives for our meeting this evening are to talk about the next year. So we want to engage in a conversation with each of you on the steering committee about our goals for 2021, and we're going to be being led in that conversation by Domingo. And then we also have a really special presentation this evening. Dr. Stephanie Yoon and Dr. Sabrina Perino, who are both doctor representatives on the steering committee representing the health community, are with us this evening and have prepared a presentation specific to air quality impacts, specific to Portside community. So we're going to be talking about that and have some space in the agenda. And we're excited about this because in the year we've been facilitating, this is our first actual public health presentation. So we're really excited, and we've been talking with Domingo about how we can keep this going. And so we'll talk about that more too later on in the meeting. And then lastly, we just want to celebrate. Every month you guys make the effort to be here with us. It's a big commitment, we know, and we're so grateful. And so we just want to celebrate with you all. That's our last meeting of 2020, and yay, 2020 is gone. And better things to come next year. Next slide, too, thanks. So our agenda today, so following the welcome remarks, we'll go into roll call the steering committee, provide some updates, then we'll approve the meeting notes and the agenda. We have two subcommittee updates from the Land Use Subcommittee and from the Maritime Clean Air Strategy Subcommittee. And then we'll jump into the steering committee planning for 2021. We'll discuss goals and milestones for 2021 and have a time for just conversation among the steering committee. And then we'll go to our health presentation. And then next slide, Chewy, we'll go to public comments, closing remarks, and we'll adjourn for the evening and for the year. Chewy, one thing we wanted to talk about and we were reflecting on is at our first meeting when we started, we brought these meeting agreements and we had them on a butcher paper for those of you who remember. We just wanted to reflect on these again, and in 2021, I think we're going to be bringing these back into just as a constant reminder that our goal as meeting facilitators and also as steering committee members is to make sure that we create a meeting space that everyone feels safe and comfortable to contribute. We want to make sure that we're making space where the people that are easy talk often to talk, but also to know when to step back to maybe make space for people who are maybe a little more hesitant to talk or for whom it may be more difficult. Again, in the Zoom world, it's easier to talk once at a time. So some of these guidelines we may have to adapt for the Zoom world. But really, we're here once a month to listen to each other. We each come with a different perspective. And we want to make sure that not only are we listening, but we're respecting each other, our opinions, the different types of knowledge that we bring, both from the residents to the science experts to the doctors. And that we all have a different perspective that is important, and which is why the community air protection program requires the steering committees to be so diverse. And Helen, I think that if you can talk a little bit closer to the phone, the Spanish, I'm hearing that your voice is getting cut off a little bit. And lastly, to be conscious of time, I've always committed that our goal is to end on time. Unfortunately, with the technical difficulties over the last couple of meetings, we've ended a little bit later, so I'm sorry about that. But I have a new computer, I'm sitting in a new space today, so hopefully we don't have those issues. So next slide, Chewy. We're going to do roll call, and this time I'm going to do a little bit, try to make it less painful for everybody and use I was trying to take a role as people came into the meeting this evening. So with that, I'm going to call out the names that I have here present, and if I don't call out your name, please let me know. So I see Ashley Rosia Tremonti. I see Jack Mongers present. I see Sarah Giobi. I also see Massey Hatches here in support with Jack. I see Sarah Giobi. I saw Larry Hofreiter, Elisa Arias. I think I saw David Flores. Is Joy Williams here tonight as well?
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, Joy. And I also want to recognize the next person who I think he's here, but I recognize that, oh, he's not here today, but Raymond Ted from National City emailed us to let us know that he is leaving National City. So I don't know if Chris is here tonight in our presentation. his alternate. Okay, so I wanted to recognize him, but he's not here, so so we don't have anyone from National City this evening. So that will be a change for next year. That will be we're following up with the city to see who will be the new liaison. Roman, are you here this evening?
Yes, I'm here. Good evening.
Hi, Roman, and Stephanie, I see here in the room, and Sabrina Perrino, are you here? I don't see Dr. Perrino yet, but she may be joining us a little bit later. Jose Marquez Chavez, I saw. AC, I saw. Helen, his alternate, I saw. Liana Rios is not with us this evening, but she asked her new colleague, Dinah Willier, to join in representation. So
I'm here, Daniela. Liana
you are
Rios
there.
is here.
Now I
I'm
see you.
here.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Hello.
So Liana is here and Dinah's here as well. Oh, wonderful. Okay, great. Great. Good to see you. Sorry. Is Filomena here? I don't see Filomena. I believe I see Sandy Naranjo, who we should congratulate. She's now also a port commissioner for the city of National City. Is that right, Sandy?
Yeah, that is correct. Thank you. I'm here tonight.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Great. Hi, Ted. I see you. I saw you earlier. Is Hillary Medina here? Hillary's not here this evening. Ya vi a Alicia Sánchez ahí. Y Margarita Moreno también la veo en el chat box. Is Irma Ortiz with us this evening? No, Irma. And Olympia, is Olympia able to be with us tonight? No, she has class. Okay. Vanessa Contreras, I think I saw you. Vanessa, are you here?
Yeah, Vanessa Contreras is here. I'm here.
Hi, Vanessa. And Sal, I saw you. Sal Abrica from the Teamsters. Montserrat, I saw. Silvia, I saw. Is Ashley Gonzalez here with us this evening? Don't see Ashley with us. I saw Josephine Talamantes. Great. And is Naomi Sanchez with us this evening? Naomi's not here. Okay. And is Maritza Garcia here?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Maritza. Last one, not least. Wonderful. Okay, thank you everybody for that. And hopefully, was that better than having each of you mute, or what do you guys prefer? I am breaking up. Okay, can you hear me better now? All right. Well, I am breaking up. Okay, Chewy, can you hear me?
You're slightly better.
Yeah,
Better.
Okay, well, we are trying, so we will see. Okay. All right, keep letting me know. And if you guys just want to just tell me that I'm breaking up instead of writing in the chat, sometimes that'll be easier for me. Okay, great. Okay, so with that, Chewy, then next, I think we can go to updates. So I think the only update that we had was that Raymond is leaving and will be moving, and I don't know, does anyone else have any other updates? Any updates from the Air District? Ok, y estoy viendo que no se escucha nada tampoco en el canal de español. Sorry, I'm getting a message that the interpretation also is not coming through. Oh, but okay, sí, ahora la escucho. Okay. Okay, great. Okay, wonderful. So I guess next slide, Chewy, we can move on to vote of approving the minutes from the November meeting. So can we have someone from the steering committee make a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
This is Jack Monger, so moved.
Great. Was that Josephine? Thank you, Josephine. Anybody opposed? No? Great. Okay, so we will approve the meeting minutes from last time and also the agenda for tonight. Wonderful. Okay, so with that, I will hand it off to our Larry Hofreiter first to provide an update from the last meeting of the Maritime Clean Air Strategy Subcommittee, and then we'll introduce David Flores to provide a brief update from the Land Use Subcommittee. So Larry, if you want to go ahead.
Sure, thanks, Daniela. Just real quick, I just wanted to let the steering committee know that we've had 5 meetings so far. The MCAS subcommittee meeting For those of you that don't remember, in addition to working on the AB617 Serp document, the port is concurrently also working on what we're calling the Maritime Clean Air Strategy for the Port of San Diego, or the MCAS. So we've had 5 meetings. I think they're going really well. I really appreciate that we've had really good questions. I think good engagement. So far, just to report out to the group, we've discussed the environmental justice element that's going to be in the Port Master Plan update. So that's the port's long-range planning document. We've also reviewed cargo handling equipment, how we're going to try to advance electrification of that, commercial harbor craft as an emission source, as well as trucks. We have a few meetings. We're meeting every other week, so I'd encourage anyone here. I try to get the agenda to APCD staff on Friday, so usually it's posted on the AB617 website. So even if you're not a member of the MCAS subcommittee, please feel free to join. Again, I think we're learning a lot. It's good questions, good back and forth. And I really just want to give a shout out to the residents and the other participants that are volunteering their time to help us work on it. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Daniela. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Larry. Appreciate that update. Great. So with that, David, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Daniela. Good evening, everybody. So I have 2 updates from the Land Use Subcommittee. One is that we've been doing a little bit of research on starting to try to be helpful with identifying sites for electric charging infrastructure, and I reached out to Liana Rios, right, from SDG&E. There's a strategy that was identified in the ports of LA and Long Beach that looks at charging infrastructure, and of course capacity of the energy grid is important. And so Liana is helping to identify not only the capacity for portside communities, but maybe bring to the committee, I hope, right, potential sites, because as we advance the long-term infrastructure plan for electrification of vehicles, I think it's important that we stay ahead in portside, and hopefully we can present a strategy around that that's a little bit more specific, and work with the port also and see how, see where it might be a best possible site or 2 or 3 that can be identified. Also, another update is that EHC has been working to connect some of the land use strategy recommendations with the City of San Diego through the Barrio Logan Community Plan update, and it's good because it will help to facilitate some of the Harbor Drive multimodal actions and strategies that are included in the Serp also. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you, David. All right, so with that, we're going to hand it over to Domingo to lead us through the conversation for planning. And I think, we can go to, yeah, so Domingo has some slides, and after that, I can stop the share so people can just look at each other. So go ahead, Domingo. Domingo, are you on mute?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. Good evening again. I want to talk about the timeline for the development of the Serp. I know we just last month, our board adopted the early strategies for the Serp, or the phase 1. We are now working on phase 2, or just finalizing really the Serp to present it to our board in May. So I wanted to share with you the timeline that we're working with. It's pretty ambitious, but we are also very committed to get this done on time, and with the help of everybody and our continued collaboration, I'm very positive that that will be accomplished. If we can go to the next slide, please. So you'll see here in December, we're talking about this proposed timeline. This is this presentation today. We are also in the process of reviewing and refining chapters as needed based on the comments that we received. As you might remember, we did receive comments in the past after we docketed our board letter to consider for the board's consideration of the Serp phase 1. So some of those comments weren't able to make it on time before that draft was presented to the board. So we are now in the process of addressing all those comments and incorporating them into the final draft. And we're also coordinating with the subcommittees and with the agencies who have an implementation role, so that all of those strategies that were in the original draft can be refined as appropriate and finalized. This month is a little bit challenging with the holidays coming. Availability of different folks is kind of tricky. So we're trying to push through and do our best. But our goal is to start having these conversations now, so that we can get, just continue working on that when the year starts. So moving to January, in January, we will present a phase 1 implementation update to make sure that we keep everybody informed as to what's going on with all those early strategies that were adopted already. We don't have to wait until we adopt a final SERP to start implementing those early strategies. The work on many of those has started already, and others need to be kickstarted. So in January, we'll be presenting an update to inform everybody how we're doing with that. And moving forward, we'll continue to update this steering committee every other month on the progress that we're making on those phase 1 strategies. Another thing that we'll communicate in January is just providing an update in general as to the development of the SERP. What are some of the conversations that we're having with the different agencies and in the subcommittees to move the SERP forward, and any points that we're discussing. And we'll continue our coordination with the subcommittees and with the agencies to finalize the SERP. Our goal is that in February, we can have a presentation of the final strategies to this committee for our discussion. So I anticipate that February we'll dedicate the entire meeting to this, because it is a long document and we want to make sure that we cover all the relevant information. And then if we can go to the next slide, please. And then the goal is that in March, we can have, first we'll have another update on first 1 implementation. Again, that will occur every other month. But our goal is to, in March, open up a 3-week comment period for the general public and anybody who wants to comment on our final draft, to do so in that 3-week period. We're going to conduct a couple of workshops in the similar fashion as we did with the early phase 1 strategies, to get more public engaged and get more comments. And then we'll also work on refining our final draft as needed based on the comments that we receive. Our goal then will be in April, presenting our final SERP to the Portside Steering Committee, so that everybody knows what will be proposed in May to our board. And then finally in May, one more update on phase 1 strategies, and our goal will be to present our final SERP to the APCD board for approval. And something that I wanted to comment is one of the discussions that we were having at the SERP subcommittee, I believe it was last week. We were discussing how to move forward after the board adopts our final SERP, as far as if we need to make updates, if we need to continue to incorporate additional data that we get from our monitoring activities, which we will, because we're still in the process of bringing up online some of the monitoring sites. What would that process look like after a final SERP is adopted? And we had that conversation with CARB, and the guidance was that we would be able to continue to update the SERP as appropriate. We'll establish a process to do that, but this is a living document, and the fact that we are adopting, or that our board is adopting a SERP in May, doesn't mean that our work ends there. All of the work that we have been doing is preparation work to have our SERP, but really the adoption of the SERP marked the beginning of all of our work with the portside community. So with the understanding that this will continue to be, this will be an ongoing process, and the SERP will be a living document that we can update as appropriate. And we will establish a process to do that as part of the adoption of the SERP. So I don't know if there are any questions at this point. I want to talk a little bit more about how we will organize with the subcommittees to work on this, but I realize that it's a lot of information, so I want to provide some space for comments if anybody has any.
Domingo, this is David.
Hi, David.
Meeting. One question. So when do you know when you will have those other strategies that were not in the draft, when those will be presented? Are those going to be presented soon? Are those going to be presented together for the February meeting?
Definitely February, but my goal is to be able to present those in January when we present our next update, so that we can have enough time to discuss and to get input.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And that's part of the coordination that will be taking place and that.
Oh, Daniela, you just broke it off.
Hear me still?
You broke off, Domingo, but I think can you
all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I got booted out of the of the meeting. It looks like my Zoom restarted. So I don't know if you were able to hear what I said, but in essence, yes, our goal is to present those in January so that we provide enough time for discussion and input. And that's also part of the discussions that are taking place with the subcommittees and with the implementing agencies this month and also in January.
So, creo que hubo un poquito de interferencia con el canal de interpretación, así que I'm just going to give a quick summary in Spanish. Básicamente que en enero vamos a tener una presentación de las estrategias nuevas que va a proponer el Distrito de Aire para la segunda fase del plan para reducir las emisiones en la comunidad. Hay que moverse, hay poco tiempo para tomar acción, entonces con Domingo vamos a estar tratando de enfocar cada reunión para estar seguro que estamos avanzando con el progreso, aunque como ya se aprobó la primera fase, esas estrategias ya se van a empezar a implementar y cada otro mes en esta reunión, Domingo va a traer una actualización de la implementación de las estrategias de la primera fase para que el comité esté al tanto de cómo se están implementando las estrategias. Así que, okay. That's so funny, Domingo. I don't know how I stopped your video.
It just said you cannot start the video because, oh, there we go. I'm getting a message now that I can.
Oh,
Can you see me now?
Yes, now we can see you.
Okay, perfect. All right, so as I was saying, David, yes, our goal is to have those strategies, present those strategies in January so that we get enough time to for discussion and to provide input.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions at this point from anybody?
I do see Larry's hand up, so Larry, go ahead.
Sure, just a quick comment. I just wanted to thank you, Domingo, for emphasizing that the SERP is a living document. And I understand we need to get it moving and we need to get it approved. I just want to make sure that as we continue to develop the maritime clean air strategy with the port, that we're trying to stay as closely in line with the AB617 SERP as we can. But just again, recognizing that it is a living document, and as we begin to learn more stuff as part of the maritime clean air strategy at the port, we'll have an opportunity to revisit the AB617 SERP. So thanks for making that point.
Sure, absolutely, and that's part of it too. We know that there's a lot of things happening, and it's a lot of moving pieces. So we certainly don't want to miss the opportunity to have coordinated efforts, because we certainly don't want to be working on different parallels. So that's part of why it's important and that we that the SERP will be a living document, so that we can be nimble enough to adapt and make sure that we're coordinating as much as we can.
Great. Does anybody else have a comment or a question? So I think we also wanted to use this time to have you guys as steering committee members provide any questions or any ideas or goals or directions that you would like to see for the steering committee in the coming year.
And Daniela, sorry to interrupt if I may, just one final thought too, and this is also regarding the subcommittees. We're also planning on, like you all saw on the slide, we have a very compressed timeline to work on this. So at this point is really all hands on deck from all of those who are actively involved in developing that final SERP. So in order for us to streamline that process as much as we can, we're going to really have that SERP subcommittee serve as our main working group or working committee dedicated to bringing all the parties together. So I know that the MCAS subcommittee kind of absorbed the port subcommittee and also the trucks. So at the SERP subcommittee, we're planning on expanding our subcommittee so that we can include all the different representatives from the implementing agencies in the SERP. And also we want to make sure that we expand our public engagement even at the subcommittee level, so that the public can be engaged throughout this entire process. So we really welcome your assistance and your ideas in getting more members of the public to participate in the subcommittee or to get their input as we move forward.
And remind us, Ashley, are you I think you're the co-chair of SERP's subcommittee. When are the meetings? Or is there a next scheduled meeting?
Our next scheduled meeting for the SERP subcommittee is next Tuesday at, 5 o'clock, I believe.
You guys don't mess around Christmas week and your meeting Tuesday night.
That's true. Very, very dedicated. Also, there's nowhere to go. But anyways, I was just going to drop in the chat. If anyone is interested in receiving the invite to any of those meetings, just feel free to send me an email and I'll put you on it. It's just an Outlook invite and it's a Zoom meeting link, just like the one we use here. And I'm happy to put anyone on there. Even if you just want to come listen or you're a member of the public, anyone is welcome.
So, just repitiendo en español también por si no se acá te escucho bien, que el subcomité del SERP va a ser como que el subcomité donde se va a concentrar más en la conversación de las estrategias para el plan de la segunda fase, y la próxima reunión de ellos va a ser el próximo martes a las 5 de la tarde vía Zoom, así que si quieren incorporarse a esa reunión, Ashley acaba de poner su correo electrónico en el chat para que puedan pedirle que ella que le mande la invitación. Pero sí quería abrir también quiero repetir que este momento de la agenda la tenemos abierta para discusión del subcomité para hablar acerca de las estrategias que podemos quieren incorporar o metas que quieren incorporar en el próximo año. Entonces, como Domingo también estaba implorando, que es importante la participación de la comunidad y si hay ideas de cómo podemos aumentar la participación de los miembros de la comunidad en este subcomité, en los subcomités y también en todo el proceso. So, just repeating what Domingo said for everybody, providing a summary of Ashley's remarks. So, thank you everyone for your patience. Are there any questions or ideas or from the steering committee? Yes, I see somebody has their hand up. Larry, go ahead, Larry.
I think so. I'll just throw it out here. I don't have strong feelings, but we've been trying to cover a lot of material at the MCAS subcommittee meetings. And I think it wasn't today, but it was at the last MCAS subcommittee we had. I think there were a couple of people that indicated an interest in potentially having more learning opportunities in terms of what are the existing regulations, how are they enforced. So that's just an idea I'll put out there if anyone wants to add to it or further explain. But I think that we find that the same issue, I think, with the steering committee is there's always a lot of material to cover and it's really hard to do so. So I'm not sure if that's something we maybe want to look at in terms of having outside of this forum opportunities for people to learn about stuff. Again, just a thought.
Great. Okay, so I'm hearing, making sure that we're making time for additional learnings that are coming from the subcommittee, like requests for more information. Great. And Roman, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Daniela. I was just going to add to what Larry mentioned, that we had the Air Resources Board participate in the previous meeting, and we talked about potentially developing some form of educational series, right? Where we went deeper into, stuff that Larry mentioned, but I think even more into some of like the more like technical components of like the conversations we've been having. And I can't remember who it was from CARB, but they were going to check in with the Air District on trying to figure out how to develop that. And so I think if we can incorporate that, that would be really helpful because, as we always see, there's a lot of information we got to process and a lot of technical information as well. And I think if we could have that provided and, maybe some resources attached to that, whether that be like documents or videos or something, I think that might be helpful for us to better grasp like everything that we talk about and be able to develop better recommendations for the Serp.
Great. So I want to also lift up that we have some colleagues from CARB in the attendee mode. So if any of you want to raise your hand and or have a comment to add to the conversation, since go ahead, feel free, comfortable. If not, it's okay. But I think that is a good point that we have talked a lot about that, Roman, about having some type of educational, like supplementary educational classes or not classes, but spaces available to learn. So go ahead, Domingo.
Yes, and I think the comment's also very timely, Roman, because I think that today's presentation on health is one that we would definitely want to have as one of those resources. I think that everybody will find it very informative. So that's one of that's part of the information that we had talked about making available. And all of the presentations are available online and on our website as part of the notes and everything. But specifically, presentations like the one we'll have today on health is one that we certainly want to promote for all of those new members of the steering committee and even members of the public who are coming on board and trying to find out why it is that we're doing what we're doing. So yes, with that in mind, we'll continue to work on providing that information and on gathering it.
Go ahead, Jack. I see that you have a hand up.
Thank you, Daniela. Domingo, thanks for that outline. I just wanted to add, if I could, the conversation you and I had a month or so ago with regard to some sort of presentation relating to the emissions that are being identified at the various sampling stations around National City and Barrio Logan, so that we can understand what they are, what risk they pose, what limits EPA has set for those specific emissions, so that we can have that kind of current, up-to-date understanding of exactly what emission levels are and what we're faced with.
Absolutely, and that will be an accompanying presentation, our sort of a part two to the presentation that we will have today. So the focus today will be on providing a common understanding of what the impacts of air pollution are to health. And the idea is that next month we will bring some of the data that we have captured already through our monitoring activity and link it and try to find those links as far as, okay, this is the data that we have in the community. How does that translate, or how does that connect with the health effects that we discussed today, and with the parameters and the guidelines that EPA and other agencies have set forth as far as emissions limits, etc. So that part is forthcoming. We currently don't have all of the air quality data that we will work on, that we're working on having, and that we will have, but we can certainly start that conversation with the data that we do have right now. So that's a presentation that will be coming in January.
Thanks, Domingo. That'd be very helpful to be able to put those health effects together with the current emission data and see where everything stands. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely. No, thank you.
Yeah, and that goes back to one of my goals for next year, which is to tie the meetings more and to make sure that each meeting we're not only advancing the SERP, and that we're clear that every presentation that we're talking about is clear goes back to making sure we're making progress towards our goal, but also that we're building our capacity as steering committee members, learning, we're making the connections, and we're really understanding things. And so I think that's been a personal goal for me as the facilitator. And I know we have a lot of new members, and so I'm wondering if any of the new members have any particular goals for 2021, or any advice or feedback, or as we're thinking about, as we're opening the space to really think about how we can make these meetings a place where everyone, you feel like you're understanding what you're being asked to comment on. So I don't know, Maritza or Josephine or anyone. Part of this is that we're trying to make more educational opportunities available. I don't know if anyone has any just thoughts or.
Well, just coming into it, I mean, following the agenda and looking at what's being proposed, and then tying it to educational components seems to me a relevant educational process to be engaged in, to be further advocates in the future as well as present time.
Okay, good. So it sounds like we're on the right track.
I'm just a little bit worried about the projection that Domingo just presented. It just seemed very, very ambitious, and in a short amount of time, it seemed to me that it might engage more, considering COVID still in place, for community outreach. That may be a little bit harder to do under the circumstances.
I completely understand it and hear your concern, and it's something that concerns me as well, as far as being able to get the level of engagement that we want. But we are really committed to making it happen. So we're just going to work really hard to be able to accomplish it. Just reminding everybody, we're trying to meet CARB's timeline to have the SERP in place as well. So that's also something that's dictating the timeline that we're following for the district and also for the rest of the implementing agencies. And we also have to make sure that in the time that we take to develop the SERP, the Serp, that we build time in between to, to provide space for comments and feedback. So keeping that in mind is why we are trying to be very aggressive with our timeline in the next couple of months, so that leaves us enough time to be able to have those workshops and to have that comment period for other members of the public, and make sure that we incorporate as much input as we have. But I certainly hear your concern, and we will work very hard to make sure that we're engaging everybody as much as we can.
Thank you.
No, thank you for your comment.
And just reminding everyone in the attendee mode, members of the public, and if there's any comments that you have or ideas for how to do that, how to engage folks in the portside cities more, or any of our community organization partners. I know EHC, you guys do a lot of community work, and everybody has been adapting in COVID. Sé que para los miembros de la comunidad también, si tienen ideas de cómo podemos mejorar el enlace, y en EHC los compañeros sé que están haciendo mucho trabajo a pesar de todo, para alcanzar la gente a pesar de todas las incomodidades que tenemos ahora con la pandemia. So, no sé si tienen una sugerencia o idea de específicamente cómo podemos asegurarnos que llegue el mensaje y que la gente participe en los talleres acerca de la próxima fase del plan.
Pues sí es verdad, en EHC también hemos tenido un poco de problemas para alcanzar a más gente, porque mucha de nuestra gente, nuestras comunidades, no tienen el acceso a poder entrar a Zoom o poder tener estas conversaciones virtualmente. Entonces, igual pues por teléfono a veces puede ser un poco difícil, ¿verdad? Porque solamente estás escuchando la información, pero sí puede ser una opción, ¿verdad? Invitar a más gente y que participen por medio de su teléfono, aunque no estén viendo visualmente, porque ellos pueden conversar, tener una conversación y escuchar lo que estamos diciendo.
So just to translate, just to translate real quick, Montserrat is just saying that EHC has also struggled with how to reach community members in this time of the pandemic, that many community members lack access to the ability to join Zoom meetings like this, and that we may want to consider other options, like for instance, phone meetings where people may not have the Wi-Fi capacity or video, but they can listen in, and you lose the video, but maybe even just listening, they can have a dialogue.
Montserrat, muchas gracias por tu comentario, y me gustaría conectar contigo, aparte para discutir esto un poquito más. Se me vienen algunas ideas a la mente de cómo podemos involucrar a esos miembros del público que no tienen acceso a internet, y que lo podemos hacer a través del teléfono, y quizás sea enviarles alguna presentación por adelantado que ellos puedan tener físicamente frente a ellos, y que después se pueda discutir a través del teléfono para poder obtener sus comentarios. Quizás podemos empezar a colaborar con ustedes para organizar una lista de personas que les interese participar de esa manera, y así nosotros podemos hacerles llegar la información necesaria y después conectar por teléfono.
And so I can just translate real quickly for Domingo, just that saying that he would like to connect with Montserrat about those ideas, and that about how to reach folks that don't have internet access, and that some ideas that come to mind can be like getting information to them, printed information to folks, and then maybe ahead of a phone meeting. So while people may not be able to see a PowerPoint presentation, they can follow along with the paper presentation while on their phone and have that access. So.
Sí, está bien, claro que sí. Podemos hablar luego, Domingo, de estas opciones, y claro que sí. Yo organizo en National City, pero EHC también estamos trabajando en Barrio Logan, así que pudiéramos alcanzar más personas.
Perfecto. Gracias, Montserrat.
I'd be happy to do that. That her focus is National City, but EHC has other organizers in Barrio Logan that they can connect with. So looking forward to that. Great. And I see one hand up, sorry. And for some reason I'm not, let's see, David Flores, go ahead, David.
Hi, thank you. I think, and just brainstorming, I think one maybe way to think a little bit differently right now about how we're reaching folks is, it would be it might be good to have some recorded sessions of for educational purposes of the Serp, like maybe grouped by the different types of strategies, that where then you could generate a Google form or survey asking questions of the community, and that just generates a link, right? So I think if there's a place where the elements of the Serp are presented in a video presentation or recorded, that can live somewhere, and if there's a series of additional inputs that the community can give through a Google form or survey, that's just a link. And so I think that turning kind of educational piece to a video format where it's always there, anybody can see it whatever time, those links are very easy to share. That might be another idea.
Great idea. Thank you, David. Silvia, do you want to go ahead? And
yes.
then Larry.
These are great ideas from David and Montserrat, and I also collaborate with them in regards to this. And perhaps, I'm not sure, it might be a little bit more challenging, but it could happen where we could talk to other agencies who have already the training or provide some type of access through internet, like training for Zoom conferences, for example. On my behalf, I do work a lot with the residents from Paradise Creek here in National City. So what I created was some simple video and how to access Zoom. So things like that could help a lot and have them practice on it. But if the other agencies already have this in place, perhaps they could help us assist us with this type of challenge.
Silvia, and you just made me think about our public libraries. So that's a resource that I will reach out to, at least for county public libraries, and I know that they have their partners in the different cities as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if public libraries have something like that already. So I think that it would be worth checking. So I'm putting that on my notes here to double check on that. That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
And feel free to reach out for property management, where they are open to collaborate with any type of agency to move this type of goals, especially right now in this COVID, situation. So. Thank you.
Larry, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, just real quick, just to build on what both Sylvia and David suggested, kind of a shameless plug for our port tenants, but I think they're coming to the steering committee next month to present a video on the port tenants grant award that really showcases some of their zero emission equipment that they got as part of a CEC grant. So I just want to put that out there as, again, there might be ways to improve it, but when maybe as we watch that video next month, that can be at least a resource, as we look at maybe moving some of the materials more to a video online format as opposed to just documents.
Great, thanks. And Domingo, your public library just give me an idea, and I know I'm the facilitator, but my youngest daughter just entered LAUSD this year, and with COVID, the school district has been very proactive in sending the parents text messages every night at 5 o'clock. Our phone starts ringing in Spanish and in English with messages. And so, just reflecting that, we used to meet out of school, and we have monitors at the schools, I think in Port Said, at least at one school, I believe. And so maybe if I know that there's difficulties, but maybe if there's parent centers or the PTAs that we can maybe reach out to. And I know folks, I'm sure EHC and others in the community and Silvia are already there, but adding them to the list. And Silvia, I like the idea of bringing in resources that people are already using and kind of not having to recreate the wheel. Well, are there any other comments, ideas, how to engage new constituencies you want to engage in the next year? we're just trying to meet the timeline. So we appreciate everyone's efforts, and it doesn't end once we approve the final SERP, I think is the most important point here. And so that's, you know, evidenced by the phase 1 strategies that were already adopted. There will be continual reporting back for that throughout next year. Go ahead, Silvia.
Yes, just a quick thought. I understand there was some type of advocacy where certain areas could get some internet access for people who don't have that, low income or anybody who doesn't have that access. So maybe we could go through there and kind of, you know, support that, and because we need it basically for our residents and whoever, you know, requests that. So maybe we could do that. And like Larry said, if there are any grants that could support that, that's even great.
Great. Yes, partnering with organizations already making Wi-Fi accessible. And I think if you guys have those resources available, sending them to Domingo or to myself or both of us, so we can, you know, Domingo's fielding a lot. And Sandy Naranjo also in the chat box, thank you, Sandy, just reminding us that or asking that, you know, what is our capacity to do social media outreach? And, you know, I don't know, does the Air District have a comms department that does outreach?
We are actually in the process of hiring a communications person, a communications officer. So we soon will, but that doesn't mean that we can't do anything in the meantime, right? So we are definitely able to work internally with our existing resources to make sure that we also maximize our outreach through social media, for sure.
And one idea just to throw out there is maybe around the workshops, we start an outreach committee that would be a short-term committee of folks that would just meet to help with the outreach for those public workshops. Just an idea.
I think that's a great idea.
And it would be short-lived. It would end at the end of the workshops, but we're committing to 2 workshops. That's right, los talleres, ¿sí?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So those oportunidades. And I don't know, one question is, I'm seeing Josephine saying that the Logan Heights Community Development Agency is working to help with internet connection south of the 8. So, okay, good to know, Josephine. So we'll connect with that. Make a note of that. Great, well, so we have a couple of minutes left here. I wanted to open up anybody from CARB or members of the public who wanted to add any comments or ideas or questions. No, anyone from the steering committee? Final thoughts? Domingo, you want to close this out?
I just wanted to thank everybody for their participation, for their great ideas, for their engagement, and please feel free to reach out to me directly too if you have any thoughts that come to mind after our meeting. We don't have to wait until we meet again. So I'm just gonna put my email address in the chat for everybody to see, and please know that you can reach out to me at any time. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Muchas gracias, Domingo. Y reiterando que con cualquier duda se pueden contactar con Domingo por su correo electrónico que va a poner en el chat. Okay, so with that, Stephanie, we're gonna bring you on if you want to start your camera, and Chewy, if you want to bring your presentation back up. And Stephanie, I am going to go ahead and spotlight you so everyone can see you. And great, and I don't think Sabrina has joined us yet. I know she has her kids in the evening, so what if she does join, I'll let you know.
Okay, yes, thank you. And Chewy, you're gonna flip slides for me?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you so much. So good evening, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Stephanie Yoon. I'm a family practice physician. So I have a background in primary care. I also specialize in a field called palliative medicine. And so I currently work in the hospital setting under that department. Sabrina Perino, she is a pediatrician. And so I'm hoping she can join our meeting because, you know, she has a unique but very important perspective on some of the health effects, especially in our children. So we'll see if she pops in, but you know, I'm happy to be presenting kind of what I want to look at as a very basic introduction to the link between air quality and health. You know, we hear a lot about a lot of the technical aspects that are being implemented, and I've certainly been learning a whole lot about that. But you know, considering that there are a lot of new steering committee members, myself being included, you know, we thought it'd be good to kind of put a basic foundation to ultimately kind of some of the reasons that, you know, this whole project has been put into place. Shui, if you can go to the next slide. So the objectives I'm hoping to be able to cover for the presentation tonight are, one, you know, I'm hoping that people will be able to describe the most important air pollutions or pollutants that affect the health of people. Two, that they can list common health problems associated with air pollution. Become more familiar with how percentiles as a statistic are used in reporting data. And then finally, understand what CalEnviroScreen is and how it was used to identify portside neighborhoods that are of focus in AB617. Before I go any further, Daniela, I know that you've been interpreting with the Spanish. Do you want me to stop after every slide, or what works best for you?
Sorry, I was finding my unmute button suddenly. I was just texting Montserrat. Montserrat, ¿han podido escuchar a la intérprete? Porque no pude escuchar ahora que estaba en el canal.
No, de repente no se escucha su voz, pero sí se corta.
Ah, pero ahora te escuchamos, Helen. Ahora que dijiste eso, te escuché muy fuerte. Ah, sí, ahorita sí.
Ahorita
Okay.
sí. De hecho, por eso yo no he podido hacer ningún comentario porque la verdad no entiendo todo, no estoy entendiendo todavía la junta correcta.
Ok, lo siento.
Pero
Alicia.
aquí estoy. Por eso apago mi cámara para poderme arrimar a la bocina.
Ok, so Helen, si puedes seguir así, yo voy a estar en el canal. Si necesitan ayuda, me pueden decir y le ponemos pausa y puedo cambiar para darle un descanso a Helen y para que se escuche, pero usemos el chat para hacer eso. Okay, so Stephanie, sorry. I think Helen's having, our interpreter has a little bit of sound issues, but so we're going to, they're going to let me know, and if she needs a break and if I can jump in. So if we do that, Chui's just going to have to stop the share for a second to make me the interpreter. Sorry, the Zoom logistics are funny. But okay.
Okay, so
yeah,
I'll just,
so we'll let you know.
Go and then you jump in if I need to stop then. Okay,
yes.
All right. So this slide, it's a busy slide. Don't worry, we're not going to go over every single part of the diagram in the picture. But I just wanted to kind of give a visual demonstration of how actually complex the issue of air pollution is. Air pollutants, right, are anything that is in the air other than the normal gases that we think of, such as nitrogen and oxygen, carbon dioxide, and so when we talk about air pollutants, there are lots of different components that we could be talking about. They're listed on the left. And just so you know, some of these pollutants are like solid matter, like tiny little particles. Some are gases. And then, you know, the diagram on the right, it basically just shows how different types of pollutants get into the air. Some of them are harmful directly. Some of them interact with other things that are in the air to produce other types of chemicals that are, and those chemicals are harmful. And then you can kind of see that the pollution, some of it will come back down, go into our soils, go into our waters. So see slides. So you know, it's a lot more than just things in the air that we breathe in. There's a lot of different things. But for the purpose of tonight's presentation, I just want to focus on the first three things that are on the left over there, which are particulate matter 2.5. We'll explain what that is. Diesel particulate matter and metals. So on this slide, when we talk about PM 2.5, that is in reference to particulate matter 2.5, which designates the size of those small particles. So 2.5 stands for 2.5 micrometers. And just to give you kind of a visual of how tiny that is, those pink things on the left that kind of look like rocks, those are kind of the size of a typical grain of sand. And then that long rope on the side, that is a representation of the width of a human hair. And oftentimes when you read about air pollution, you'll see reference to something called PM10, which is particulate matter that is up to 10 micrometers in diameter. And so those are represented by the little blue circles. And when we think about that, that's kind of the size of dust, pollen, mold, things like that. And then fine particulate matter, PM 2.5, are the tiny little pink balls. And so you can see that, you know, they're a quarter of the diameter of the PM10. So these are really, really fine, tiny particles that can float in the air for quite some time. And they can also get deeper into our lungs, which we'll talk about in terms of the health problems that they can cause. PM 2.5, oops, can you go back? Yeah, it just includes.
Incluye.
Are we okay? Okay, so PM 2.5 includes organic chemicals.
El de 2.5 incluye químicos orgánicos.
I'm hearing the Spanish interpretation right now. I don't know if I was switched over to the Spanish channel.
It got switched over.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're hearing it too.
Okay. I don't mind talking with the Spanish in the background. That's fine with me if that's how it works.
You need to mute your original.
How can we switch back?
So everyone, looks like Daniela is going to switch to the interpretation channel. Then I'll share the screen shortly.
Okay.
Thank you. ¿Pueden escuchar a Daniela?
No se escucha, Daniela. Está mute.
¿Tiene su... Sí.
Sí? Okay, muy bien. Okay, we'll get started soon.
Dr. Yoon, this is Robert Ryder. I work with the APCD. I just want to say how fascinated I am. I've heard this information, of course, for decades, and it's lovely to hear it from your perspective. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, are we set to go again?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So PM 2.5 can include organic chemicals, meaning things that originally came from like living animals, plants. It can also include fossil fuels, which, you know, anything that has like carbon in it, soot and metals. And then sources, things that produce PM 2.5 include cars, trucks, factories, wood burning, and lots of other activities. So it's a very common pollutant that is in the air. If we go to the next slide, this is just a basic diagram of the respiratory tract. So up at the top, it starts with the nose and the mouth. You follow the You follow it down and it gets into kind of the back of the throat, and then the windpipe or the trachea, which branches off to the two sides of the lungs. And you'll see it's kind of like an upside down tree in the sense that you have the trunk and then it branches off, and then from that they branch into tinier and tinier air passages until ultimately, if we zoomed into it a whole lot, we would get to something called alveoli, which are tiny little sacs in the lungs that help transport oxygen into our bloodstream and also help take carbon dioxide out of our bloodstream so that we can breathe it out of our bodies. I'm showing you this slide just because the size of a particle that we breathe in kind of determines how far it can get into our lungs. And so I don't know if people can see it because it's pretty tiny, but coarse particulate matter, or yeah, that left-hand arrow there, the larger particles, they tend to stay in the upper airway. They don't get really far down. We have things like mucus and boogers and all these sort of things that kind of help clean that part of the respiratory tract. But the smaller that the particles get, that next arrow there, that is PM 2.5. And so you can see that actually can get all the way down into the tiniest parts of our lungs and the deepest parts of our lungs. And so that has an effect in terms of how it affects our health. And then there's a last arrow that's ultrafine PM. We're not going to talk about that today, but it's an even smaller particle that there has been research on in terms of how it can cause health problems. If we go to the next slide. So the next pollutant that we're going to talk about is diesel particulate matter. So as you can kind of guess, this is mainly pollution that comes from exhaust of diesel engines. And that, their diesel engines are everywhere, from trucks, buses, trains, ships, like we've been talking about the port side, even equipment used to move cargo and things like that. And this type of pollution is actually a mixture of, diesel exhaust is a mixture of gases and solid particles. And so this little diagram at the bottom is just to kind of represent, the big gray circles or spheres. Those are the solid carbon spheres, but they can kind of aggregate into clusters. And stuck to those spheres is all sorts of other types of chemicals. There's also vapors that are basically pollution in gas form that are in the air. But when we talk about diesel particulate matter, we're basically talking about the solid particles. And anybody involved in the air monitoring who knows more technical aspects, if you want to jump in, if I'm kind of misexplaining anything, feel free to. But we're looking at the solid parts of this diesel emission when we talk about diesel particulate matter. And if you break it down into what types of chemicals are in it, there's hundreds of different chemicals that are in diesel exhaust, many of which have been shown to have harmful effects on our health. And then the next slide just goes over metals. Metals is another type of pollutant that is being measured at our monitoring stations. And they have the capability of monitoring, as I understand, up to 24 different metals. Most of them I don't believe are measuring that many, but some of the most common ones include arsenic, lead, chromium, which a lot of you might have heard about. And metal pollution comes mostly from industrial sources. This photo is actually just a photo that you guys probably recognize, just of the shipyards adjacent to a lot of the neighborhoods that we're focusing on. And you can kind of see how, you know, the type of industry that is in this area is very likely to produce metal pollution. And one thing I just want to note about metals is that even a very low level of metal in the air that's measured can lead to high exposure to these metals, because those metal particles eventually fall out of the air into our soil, dust, water, and we can be further exposed to those metals when those, you know, those soil particles or dust are then ingested or in some other way entered into our bodies. So metals are another focus. So if we talk about health effects of air pollution, on the left, or you know, on the right for Spanish, you'll see a list of kind of broad categories of that have been connected with air pollution. So pulmonary, or the lungs; cardiovascular, which is the heart and blood vessels; carcinogenic just means that something increases the risk of certain cancers; developmental, so you know, our children are you know, very important to us, and we always want them to be able to grow up as healthy as possible, but they have noted that there are developmental effects that are linked to air pollution. And then some newer studies are actually beginning to find that there are neurological effects. So we'll talk a little bit about that later. But you know, bottom line is that air pollution does affect overall mortality of populations, and mortality just means the death rate. And so you'll actually see, if you look at the predicted life expectancy for people in certain neighborhoods that have poor environmental quality, a lot of pollution and other things going on, you'll see that they can actually measure a difference in the projected life expectancy of people and living in those areas versus people who are living in areas of less pollution, less stress. And so I think we can go on to the next slide. Okay, so pulmonary or lung, this is, I think this is what people most commonly think of when we think about health effects of air pollution. And that's for good reason. There's a lot of data going back decades that links air pollution and lung problems. Okay, one of the ones that people are probably most familiar with is asthma. It's a disease that can affect children and adults. And what it is it's basically a disease that causes inflammation, muscle spasm, and mucus production in the airways. And air pollution, you know, for a long time has been linked to the exacerbation of asthma. So causing people to have asthma attacks. But there is some data now that is also showing that for some individuals, it actually might be responsible for them developing asthma as well. Another common lung problem is called COPD, or chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder. And so there's pretty clear evidence showing that air pollution is linked to COPD exacerbations, meaning, you know, somebody has COPD and exposure to this air pollution is making them sicker and oftentimes making them land in the emergency department or in the hospital. It's less clear if, you know, right now with the data that we have, if it is actually a cause of COPD. When I was preparing for this presentation, I saw some articles that suggested that it could also, you know, it might be a cause of COPD, but it's not as well demonstrated as, say, the asthma above, or you know, the known effects of just making somebody with COPD more sick. Air pollution also can affect lung development. So children who are exposed long-term to air pollution have been found, even if they don't have asthma itself, when they measure certain things in terms of how well their lungs are working, they have actually found a difference in children who are exposed to a lot of air pollution versus children who are not. And then finally, lung cancer. It has been linked to air pollution, especially fine particulate matter. So thinking back to that diagram about how different sizes of particles affects how deeply they can get into the lungs. You know, the PM 2.5 gets all the way down to the very, very tiny little sacs in our lungs. You know, that's thought to be why it can be a cause of lung cancer. So a lot of different things going on in the lungs, but lungs are not the only thing. So the next slide talks about cardiovascular effects. So when we talk about cardiovascular, we're talking mainly about the heart and the blood vessels. And so air pollution has been linked to increased rates of heart attacks. And a heart attack is basically damage that happens to the heart when it does not receive enough oxygen. And that's usually due to a blockage in one of the arteries supplying the heart. So one of the blood vessels that gives needed oxygen and blood to the heart muscle, it gets blocked, and that can lead to a heart attack. Some heart attacks can be fatal, meaning that people die from their heart attacks. But a lot of heart attacks, you know, somebody can survive them, but they might be left with a permanently damaged heart. And that can lead to chronic heart disease like CHF, or you know, other problems, but it can affect quality of life pretty significantly for people. And then the other cardiovascular problem that we talk about is strokes. And so kind of in the same like mechanism as a heart attack, a stroke is damage that happens to the brain when it does not get enough oxygen to a certain area. And that happens when blood supply is cut off. And just like in heart attacks, a lot of times that happens because one of those blood vessels gets blocked. And so we know that air pollution can cause both, you know, the rate of heart attacks and strokes to increase. So that's you know, the heart side. And then developmental. One of the things that has been studied with air pollution is low birth weight. So mothers who are exposed to pollution, either, you know, from traffic, industry, or they're in agricultural areas that have a lot of pollutants, are more likely to bear low birth weight babies. So these are babies that weigh less than 5.5 pounds at birth. Low birth weight babies can go on to develop asthma or other chronic diseases later in life. And they are also, unfortunately, more likely to die as infants than babies who are born at higher weights. Reproductive development has been linked to exposure to air pollutants, especially to some of the metals that are found in the air. And then lastly, brain development. This is something I threw in. It's really kind of a new finding, but there have been some articles, even published as recently as earlier this year, that are beginning to show that air pollution might have effects on the development of the brain. And part of the thinking is that some of those really, really tiny particles or gases in the air can actually cross from our lungs and into our bloodstream, and in that way get to the brain and cause changes there. So that one, you know, there's not as much evidence or data about that as, say, for example, asthma. But I think it's interesting, and I think it might be an important factor coming, you know, as we get more data. So the next slide, I just, before we talk about CalEnviroScreen, I felt it was important to talk about some terminology in how data is reported on that tool. So when we look at the maps that are coming up and how and different scores that are given to different neighborhoods, a lot of these numbers that we will see are reported as a number from 0 to 100 as a percentile. So a percentile is a value below which a certain percentage of data falls. And I know that line doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but if you look at the picture, kind of like the drawing in the middle, okay, if you had 20 people, they're all different heights, and you are the 4th tallest person out of those 20, okay, you would be taller than 80% of the people in that group. So you would be at the 80th percentile for height out of that group that's being measured. Okay, so when we talk about percentiles for air pollution in the maps that are coming up, you know, I just kind of made up a statistic, but a community that is at the 15th percentile for levels of ozone in the air, you know, that community has more ozone than just 15% of all other communities that were measured. On the converse, that means, you know, about 85% of the communities had more ozone in the air. So I hope that is useful in terms of what's coming up in terms of the slides and discussing CalEnviroScreen. So CalEnviroScreen, it's a science-based mapping tool that is used to help identify communities most affected by and most vulnerable to pollution. So air pollution is one of the measures that goes into it, but they do look at other types of pollution. And it uses environmental factors, health factors, and socioeconomic information to produce a numerical score in the form of a percentile for each of California's census tracts. So I don't know, Chewy, did you want to kind of talk in the next couple slides about how our communities were selected? I'm happy to do it too.
I was actually gonna ask Domingo if he was
oh, Domingo,
comfortable
sure.
asking that.
So can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so basically what the map shows here is a close-up. You'll see on the square to your right a close-up of the Portside community area, and you know, which includes Sherman Heights, Logan Heights, Barrio Logan, West National City, And this community was selected because of the ratings that it had through the CalEnviro screen tool. And you'll see on the map, all the areas with dark orange are areas where CalEnviro screen gave that community a score of 91 to 100% in terms of different variables that were being measured. So including things like poverty, some health outcomes like asthma, hospitalizations, pollution, etc. So there's a lot of different variables that went into producing this score, and all of those variables are known to have a compounding effect over the health of a community. So it's not just one variable alone that will determine, that a community should be included or that a community should be rated in a certain way, but the compounding effect of all of these different variables are used to produce these scores. So it is based on those scores that you see highlighted on the map that the community was selected through CalEnviro screen. So here's just a close-up of that, all the communities that I mentioned before. And these communities are made up of 12 census tracts, which means, in other words, there are sections of these communities. There are 12 sections identified in the census that belong to these communities. 4 of those are in the 98th percentile for the CalEnviro screen results for highest scores, which means that basically 98% or 98% of the communities that are scored by CalEnviro screen are better off than these 4 census tracts. We also have 8 census tracts as part of this community that are above the 85%, that are at the 85th percentile, which means that 85% of communities statewide are better off than this 8 census tracts. So those are in essence the reasons why we place a special focus on the Portside community because of these results.
Yeah, thank you, Domingo. And just to clarify, those percentiles are comparing these communities to all of California. So it's not just San Diego. These are communities that are more vulnerable to the effects of health pollution than 98% of the rest of California in terms of the census tracts. So I did pull out, like Domingo said, there are a lot of different factors that go into creating that CalEnviro screen score. But I did pull out a few different maps of the San Diego area. And you can kind of look at these maps now that you've seen the map of the selected communities for AB617. We're just going to go through some of these maps that talk about specific factors. So the first one is diesel particulate matter. Oops, I think there we go. And so you can see that, the diesel particulate matter, the darker the blue is, the higher the level of diesel particulate matter. And so for our census tracts, the 12 tracts that have been selected, 11 have an exposure risk that is greater than the 95th percentile. And 4 of those are actually in the 99th percentile. And actually, if you round it to the closest percentile, I believe they round up to 100%. So we're looking at communities that have very, very high exposure to diesel particulate matter when compared with other communities in California. The next slide shows PM 2.5, and you'll see that there's not as much correlation. But one thing I wanted to point out, if you can see the little red dots on that map, those are the monitoring sites that were used to measure PM 2.5 for creating this map. And so you can see there's not a whole lot of them. They're pretty spaced out. And so, you know, one thing that would be interesting to see would be kind of how results with the monitoring stations kind of reflect air pollution on a smaller scale, more local to the neighborhoods that we are selecting. The next slide shows one of the health indicators that CalEnviro screen uses, which is asthma. And the way they measured, or the way that they created the data for this is they looked at emergency room visits for asthma, and they looked at, you know, what census tract were those patients living in. And so they looked at the number of asthma attacks over, I think it was 2011 to 2013, and kind of turned it into a number where they could compare census tracts to each other. And so again, you'll see that the asthma rates are very high in our selected neighborhoods. And just to kind of, you know, I looked at the number of ER visits per 100,000 residents in, you know, some of the highest affected neighborhoods of the Portside community. And those numbers were in the like 125, 127 range. And if you just go up the shore just a little bit and compare those rates to, say, rates up in the La Jolla area, they overall have rates of less than 20. So, you know, just looking at the huge difference in asthma rates within the San Diego area, it's quite striking. The next slide shows, go ahead.
Can you clarify whether that's asthma prevalence rates or emergency room visits rate?
It's emergency room visits. So unfortunately, the metrics used for CalEnviro screen do not look at how many people out of 100,000 are diagnosed or carry a diagnosis of asthma. It was using data of emergency room visits for asthma. And so you're right, that's a great question. And there's a lot more terminology that I would love to go through in terms of incidence, prevalence, relative risk, absolute risk, and maybe we'll save those for future presentations, but that's a good question. These were based on emergency room visits for asthma. Okay. And then the next screen is for cardiovascular disease. So again, you'll see the Portside community has a darker green overall when you compare it to other areas of San Diego. And again, in kind of tying to the question that was asked regarding asthma, their data was pulled again from, I believe, emergency room visits for heart attacks. So there are a lot of other cardiovascular health effects that we learned about, right? So heart attacks are only one of them, stroke is another. But for this map and how the numbers were created, I believe it was heart attacks in the emergency rooms. But again, you can see that this Portside community is disproportionately affected. And then the last screen, or not last health measure that I wanted to look at was low birth weight. And this one, you know, you can see there's a lot more variability. And I don't, you know, if you look at, I didn't make a map, but if you look at hazardous waste sites, you know, there seems to be some overlay, but I included this just kind of demonstrate how complicated it is to talk about health effects and tying it to pollution, because it's really, you know, you can't ethically do an experiment where you have, you know, a certain group of people that are exposed to a certain amount of pollution, but you keep everything equal, and you have a second group of people that are not. And so, you know, there's a lot of, and you know, people go to work in different places, they have different risk factors, socioeconomic factors, and so there's not always a one-to-one correlation if you look just at the maps. But you know, health is a complicated issue, and low birth weight, despite, you know, how the map looks different than the asthma rates, low birth weight has been linked to air pollution. So I included that map. And then the last set of maps, I just wanted to show some of the socioeconomic indicators that were used in CalEnviroScreen for determining the vulnerability of a certain neighborhood. And you know, poverty, housing burden, a lot of those really reflect a lot of the health issues that people are experiencing. And so it's, you know, it's really a multifaceted type of picture when you look at everything that goes into determining somebody's health. There are a lot of things, but you know, poverty and housing burden certainly are some of those. So to wrap up, you know, on our last screen, you know, why are we doing this whole project? At least from my perspective, I see it as an environmental justice issue. You know, we want our families and our children to have opportunities to be as healthy and strong as they can, and to have the opportunities that other communities have. You know, a lot of people that I've talked to feel like they always feel like they have to be explaining themselves or justifying, you know, how they think that being next to a certain polluting agency is affecting their health. And I want to say, you know, the health disparities are real. Air quality does affect quality of life, life expectancy. It even affects the risk of dying from COVID. There was a study that looked at 6 US cities over 14 to 16 years. So it was a pretty prolonged study. And they found an increased mortality rate of 13% for every 10 micrograms per cubic meter rise in PM 2.5. And one thing I just want to point out is when we talk about an increased mortality rate of 13%, that doesn't mean 13% of people are dying. But when you look at the mortality rate of a community, that mortality rate increases by 13% for every 10 micrograms rise in PM 2.5. Same thing with coronavirus. There was a recent study that looked at reported deaths during this pandemic, and they observed that even a small increase in the level of PM 2.5, that it was associated with an increase in mortality from COVID-19. So it makes, you know, this all that more relevant in terms of this whole pandemic that we are in right now. And just to give a little bit of perspective on 1 microgram per cubic meter of PM 2.5. So if we look at you know, if we look at the map that we had of PM 2.5, and you click on a census tract in that area, the ones in the Portside community, most of you know, the PM 2.5 levels there were reported I would say in around the 11 to 12 micrograms per cubic meter range. So a rise of 1 microgram per cubic meter would be, a very rough, like 10% increase in the current levels that we have right now. So big picture, what I'm hoping is that through changes championed under AB617, we'll ultimately be able to see improvements in air quality that lead to measurable improvements in the health and well-being of residents of the portside communities. Because it's a right. I believe that health care and the opportunity to lead healthy lives is a right. And so, I just want to say, I think it's very uplifting that all these people are gathered here tonight with, the combined purpose of trying to improve the air quality and therefore the health of the residents. So I think we're hitting 45 minutes right there. I want to send it back to Daniela, Domingo, and Chui, and to wrap up.
Yeah, I guess I'll open it up to the steering committee and see if they have any questions or comments from the presentation. And feel free to raise your hand.
And I just want to, Helen, I think you're back on the interpretation mode, so. Great. I also just wanted to lift up too in the one comment that was in Spanish that I wasn't sure. Alicia Sanchez, who is one of our members, just talked about her husband who has relies on an oxygen machine to sleep. Wants to know, she wants to know if there's a possibility of doing some type of study to see if there's, what his cancer risk is in his lungs and related to the sorry, I'm translating as I go, related to the soot and to the issues, the air quality in the community. So I just wanted to lift that up.
Yeah, so my big suggestion, and I say the same thing to my family a lot of times, is if he's having problems, I would definitely recommend that he see a doctor about it, just because there are a lot of things that go into determining somebody's cancer risk and what types of study are recommended for him. I would say, he uses a breathing machine to sleep at night, and there has been, when I was going through articles, I did come across some that did mention a link between something called obstructive sleep apnea, which affects people's breathing at nighttime, and air pollution. But yeah, I would say, talk to a doctor about your concerns. And if you don't have a doctor, there are, there's a community clinic network that is out there. I actually talked to some doctors who were interested in joining the steering committee that kind of work in the area. But even if somebody doesn't have insurance, even if they're not documented, they have ways of trying to make healthcare affordable. So I would say, please reach out and see a doctor about it.
And actually, I want to lift up too that she was specifying that the night of the Navy ship fire, that his filter was particularly dark and dirty, and so that was particularly troubling.
And she had testified, right?
Yes, remember that?
Demonstrating the filter. Yes,
she showed
that was
it.
Powerful. Yeah.
Well, a lot of positive comments in the chat box, Stephanie.
Great. Thank you. No, thank you all for your attention tonight.
Daniela, may I make a comment?
You want to turn on your video? Or?
Oh yes, sorry. Hi everybody. Dr. Yoon, thanks again for the presentation and for explaining all of this information in such a clear way, and taking the time to put this together for us. I wanted to add and to remind everybody that this is an initial presentation. We are going to follow up with a second presentation that will be more specific about the data that we are collecting in the community, the data that we have so far. And even that second presentation won't be the end of it. As all of you know, we are still working on getting some of our monitoring sites up and running. So as we continue to gather data, we will continue to present that data to the community and try to link it as much as possible to what that means for the health of the community. I think that Dr. Yoon did an amazing job today at explaining to us what are the main concerns and the main areas where air pollution affects our health. But I also want to stress that when we look at why we selected, or why the Portside community was selected, is not solely based on health. There are several different compounding variables that affect even how air pollution affects health, because say for example, levels of income, poverty, housing, etc., will be determining factors on health access for certain people to be able to find or seek medical help when they are going through problems related to air pollution or related to respiratory diseases, etc. So it's really the combination of all of these different factors that are at play here. So the monitoring and the data that we get from the monitoring will be addressing the pollution side of things. That will help us inform, okay, how much pollution are we getting here from all of these different sources, or from all of these different pollutants, and that way we can better refine our strategies for improving air quality in the region, but in the communities. But we also need to take into consideration and to look at other things other than air pollution. How are we improving as a whole, as a community? How are we getting better housing, better, how are we improving the conditions of the community in general, so that all these compounding variables are not acting against the members of that community. So know that we will continue to follow up with presentations, and as we continue to gather data, we will make those connections that will help us inform how to move forward and how to assess what needs to happen and what improvements need to be made.
I just, Danelle, can I jump in real quick? I just want to be real quick, and I want to thank Dr. Yoon. Thank you so much for that presentation and breaking it down for the community. And I saw, someone mentioned in chat and then the comments here about having that on our website on AB617, part of our outreach. I think will also be really important, because you did mention the Harvard study is really showing all the areas of COVID, because you do see the high risk, the high infections of COVID in National City, or leading the by per capita in the county, Barrio Logan. So folks can see what that means when we do suffer pollution. It means we're exposed to these diseases. And so who knows what can happen next. And fortunately, this is the end, with COVID, with having the vaccine out there, but we want to make sure that this is important for folks to know. So if we can have that displayed and make that clear, so they can see the differences between communities that don't have these problems versus communities like ours that are suffering this. So thank you again, Dr. Yoon, for that presentation. And I just hope that we can see that, and that could be user-friendly for our community members and languages that they speak.
Thank you, Sandy. And I see Jack, your hand's up. You can go ahead.
Thank you. I had to find my mute button there. Dr. Yoon, thank you very much for all the work you put into that presentation tonight. I'd like to ask that at some point in the near future, once we have had the opportunity to thoroughly evaluate what the sampling stations are indicating in terms of the actual pollutants in the community, that we could then maybe refine your presentation to talk about those specific issues that are of paramount importance to the community from a health standpoint. It was very broad tonight, and there's, like you said, there are many, many factors associated with air quality and how they affect health. And I think it would be helpful, though, if we could zero in on what we learned from the sampling, and then talk about how those issues may be affecting the community health.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that plan is in the works, actually. Domingo had talked about presentation part 2, and so it would be good to kind of really make the health data or health connection very, very specific to our communities that we're working on. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Are there any other comments or questions for Dr. Yoon, either from the panelists or the attendees? And if so, folks want to raise their hand. We are at 7:55, so we have some time. If not, well, thank you so much, Stephanie, for that. That was so clear. So thank you for going so slow, especially since I was interpreting. We have recorded that presentation. All of our steering committee meetings are recorded and posted on the AB617 website. We can go back later and maybe edit this and close it, so it's just this part of the meeting. But thank you so much. And yes, so that is part of our master plan. Round 2 in January, we'll kick off with sort of a more focused presentation. And we talked about, through planning this presentation, how we can more incorporate skill building so that we're all learning together. So the Serp makes a little bit more sense to us non-air district, airhead people, and how, everything we can all feel like we're contributing and learning together and moving forward to understand this really technical, hard stuff. So today's goal was to kind of build the baseline level setting, and next at each meeting we're going to keep adding to that. So with that, I just wanted to ask if there's any members of the public that had a comment, or anyone from the panel, any of the steering committee members that had a comment on anything not on their agenda tonight. And if I don't know, okay, so hearing none. Oh, I see one. Sorry, go ahead, Stephen. Stephen D'Antoni from CARB. So go ahead. I think you can talk.
Hi, this is Stephen D'Antoni from the California Air Resources Board. I have an update about the announcement I made in October about having a public meeting, a CARB public meeting addressing the Navy ship fire incident.
Oh, sorry, I promoted him to panelist, and I think we lost your audio for a second, Stephen. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that.
Okay, I can turn my
Oh, there you
video
are. Okay, now that we can see you, sorry.
All right, so back in October, I made an announcement that CARB would have a public meeting addressing the Navy fire incident response. However, November's come and gone, and so I apologize for not having an update in November. But there were some delays going on, and we still have new information trickling in. So now the ship fire, our planned public meeting will probably happen sometime after the new year. But for today, I kind of want to give an update on what's been going on with the internal working group CARB has set up for the Navy ship fire review. So with the internal working group, we're continuing to have weekly meetings and are making progress on determining what agencies responded, when they responded, what operations occurred, and how groups coordinated and communicated. The work group is also working on identifying deficiencies in the incident response and developing recommendations for improvement. We are also putting together a thorough review of data analysis collected during the incident, and it's being conducted, and it will be included as part of the index in the final report, appendix in the final report. Like I said before, we'll probably have a meeting after we'll probably have a date set up sometime after the new year. We'll be sure to keep the community informed of updates next year. And if anyone has any questions, I'll leave my email in the chat box this time.
Thank you, Stephen. Great. Any other updates or comments? Or in the 2 minutes, a question for Stephen, or if it may be.
This is David. If I have a couple of items for the next agenda or to follow up on.
Go ahead.
Okay. first, just to give an update that we met with the Navy recently, and we're discussing advancing further detail in the Navy Serp strategies to set some targets in their strategies for emissions reductions. And the Navy Regional Director requested, asked for a formal request. So I would like to generate a draft letter and submit that for action for the January meeting, just to provide a little bit more detail on the Navy strategies, so that we could get some better emissions targets for those.
For the Serp, yeah?
For the Serp, correct.
Okay, great.
And then for the work for electric infrastructure, you know, I'd like to see if working with SDG&E, if we can present a map of the capacity of the grid for Portside. And again, this is probably work that's going to continue on, but maybe even considering the formation of a working group for the infrastructure for electrification and supporting the electrification with SDG&E. And so that's something that maybe we can see if we can connect with SDG&E on that. And finally, for 2021, I do think it's important that that there be attention on a ZEV infrastructure plan to stay ahead of whatever the fleets are going to do for Portside for the different commercial and or port drayage truck fleets.
Okay, great. Thank you, David. So thank you for initiating our new process for the letters of support. So well, you can email maybe Domingo and I a copy and we can circulate that for folks to read, and we will make sure to put that on the agenda for the January meeting. Yay, this is why we create processes and I like to use them. I'm such a nerd. Okay. Yeah, and maybe you and Leanna Rios can, maybe we can start an email chain to connect with you all about the request on electric infrastructure. Great, thank you. Any other comments? Okay, well, any other closing word? Oh, Larry, go ahead. Oh, you're on mute, I think, or oh, go ahead.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
So real quick, that just jogged my memory, David's report out. Port staff is working closely with SANDAG and Caltrans, and as well as others. We're looking at several grants right now. So we might also be returning to the steering committee in January with a letter of recommendation to support a grant application. So there's several solicitations out there. I'm not necessarily, we haven't pieced it together yet, but just a heads up, we might be reaching out to this committee to support us on those electrification efforts. So.
Great. Go ahead, Roman.
Yeah, I'll make this brief. Thank you, Daniela. As we think about 2021, I had made a request to some folks on the subcommittees about potential incentive funding to pursue. And I think it would be helpful, especially right now that Larry mentioned pursuing some funding opportunities with SANDAG and others, of getting a report out on you know, what funding opportunities are out there that we could potentially pursue to meet our SERP goals, which ones we've pursued in the past, whether they've been successful or not. So really start developing an inventory of those funding opportunities, and in a way kind of like prepare in case, you know, we know some of them are coming down later in the year. We have that inventory to kind of look at, and then really start developing a process so that we can pursue those grants so we can implement components of our SERP.
Great, I'll add that to the goals for 2021. Thank you. Okay, any other final comments? Anyone from the Air District staff? No, okay. Well, I will just say, everybody, we are so grateful for you. Estoy muy agradecido por ustedes and for allowing us, Chuy and I, to come into your space and help you all as you do this important effort to clean up the air in your community, to improve the health of Portside residents and to ensure that there's still a vibrant economy at the same time. It's challenging, but you are all the right people to be here doing it. So thank you. Thank you to the Air District for all the support. Thank you to Domingo. Thank you, Rob, for hiring Domingo. And thanks to Kathy and all the staff who put so many hours this year into getting us to where we are. Thank you, CARB staff, for joining. I know you guys have a lot of new bosses, so that's fun for the new year. Everybody, we'll see you next year. Have a happy holidays, as happy as they can be. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Hanukkah, all of those beautiful things. Okay, thank you. We'll see you next year.
Thank you, Daniela. Happy holidays to everybody.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Happy holidays.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
See you next year.
Bye, Merry
Felices fiestas a todos.
Ciao.
Thanks, everyone.
Adiós.
Thank you.